myself just to make sure that I've got nothing weird going on in my background. But it doesn't
you can tap on the little outward arrows and actually use a slightly wider version of the lens. You know, if you use the selfie camera in the actual iPhone normal video camera, if you've got it pointing towards you, if it's an iPhone 11 Pro, you can tap the little arrows to go outwards.
Yeah, it's not. I'm on an iPhone 10.
Cool.
And so I'm just trying to find something where I don't have all the lights in there and the rest of that, but it doesn't matter.
I think it looks kind of cool, actually, Bill.
Yeah, you look like the cover of a David Bowie album.
Yeah, or you know, a rock star behind stage.
That's it, exactly.
Yeah, backstage at your HQ.
Okay, well then there we are. Now I just wish I had a holder. Wait a second, I've got that. I'm gonna be fiddling while you're going on. But if you want to go live, Richard, go ahead. What the hell?
It's too late, Bill. We already are live.
There you go.
We already are live, so we already got some comments. People are watching. I know, I was going to take a day off and just take a break, but it's just, I'm thinking that people want to know, they want to talk, but the public that wasn't able to be at the summit, they want to comment. They want to, comment on what I'm interested in their view of things as well. Like Alex.
Absolutely.
Like Alex. Alex, you were commenting quite a bit on some of the live things that I did. I did like 11 different videos live to try to keep people, as much as I can reveal, which is not everything.
Oh, Richard.
As much, listen, we know going to these in the past, there's things we can talk about and things we can't talk about. So that's not.
Are you referencing the fact that they at least reminded us about the NDA, 5 separate times in the first day? It's not like they didn't emphasize it.
Well, people outside were talking about that. I'm not going to talk about that specifically. I'm just talking about, even last year, there was no NDA, but there was a there was a private session at the Juniper Hotel, which they had again this year.
Yes. I suppose the thing to think about NDAs is this is not Apple being mean to people attending and mean to people outside to sign NDAs if they sign them. What it is about is the Apple Video Applications team or the Pro Apps team protecting themselves from the rest of Apple. Because the rest of Apple may not actually want or to be too happy about Apple staff getting out there and talking to people on, at conferences and being named, and also having people come to have presentations at Apple. So this is people in the Final Cut and Motion and the video applications group being careful and making sure that they can do this again and they can do more, because the more it works, the more the information doesn't get out doing this, the more they can do it. So it's frustrating for me from being on the outside that I don't get to find out what was happening. But the advantage is they'll do more of it, and it turns out it's safe for Apple to give briefings, because there's different parts of Apple, and we have to understand that. And that may have affected the actual summit itself, because there's different parts of Apple.
Yeah, let's change the subject. I don't even want to talk about NDAs. Can we talk about the good stuff that happened? And I mean, first of all, I just don't want to ever say anything that's going to make anyone who was participatory in those meetings feel uncomfortable. And I'm so grateful that everybody was there. And it's really nice to have people from all sides of production, post-production, mingling in those hallways, and including the executives from Apple. And it was really wonderful to see that. And I wouldn't ever want to say anything that would make them uncomfortable. So anyway, that's just, I need coffee. Am I being grouchy?
No, you sound perfectly normal.
There you go. Perfect. I've already had 2 cups, or 1 cup. 1 cup.
Good morning, everybody. You did this early, Richard.
Propel water.
Are you doing something to limit caffeine, Richard?
No, just didn't have time to make it. I made 1 cup this morning. I usually have 2 or 3 cups a day. That's usually plenty. After the 3rd cup, I don't want it anymore. So.
What time did you get home last night, Richard? Because this is early. Good morning, Felipe.
Luca joined us. Felipe.
Hello, good morning,
He's
everyone.
trying to get in. There he is.
Hello, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Are you still in California, or are you you can't be back in South America?
I am in Cupertino still.
Okay, good. There you go.
But sorry, didn't want to interrupt. I'm going to continue here once I have something smart to talk about. Maybe I wait.
Unlike the rest of us.
I still have to
turn
sleep.
that off.
I'll tell you what I wish I had under my desk, though. I wish I had one of Chris Fenwick's tall makers under my desk for my feet.
The tall maker was the star of the show.
It was awesome. For those of you who don't know, and I forget do you know what wood he used? He made this wonderful, it's called an apple box normally. He calls it a tall maker. It's a full apple. But the neat thing about it is it's got room inside to put some of your grip equipment or whatever. And, you know, for people like me who are short, if I'm shooting myself, it's no problem. But if I'm working with the DP and I have to look into the camera, because I always like to look directly into the camera, I need a ladder to reach. So
it solves
Brad
the problem
Olson
of the
and I are
disappearing American milk crate.
Yes.
Milk crates are really hard to find these days.
As a carpenter, I have to say it was very good. It was excellent quality.
Yeah.
It was very smooth. He did a nice job sanding them.
Yeah,
I'm going to get one. I'm going to get one.
I'm trying to get this straightened out here. The weird... what happens is I got to, let me see. Every time I click on something, let me just see if I can get this somewhat right. When I click on the viewers, it changes the screen, and one of them is whoever's talking on Skype. That automatically changes. So sometimes there's two Serenas on the screen. So I have to try to get rid of that one.
Oh my God, one of me is bad enough.
Richard, that is when you hover your mouse over the window, you see everyone's video. That's the first one is the active speaker, so that one switches automatically.
The very very first one. Oh no!
Yeah.
See right now the second one is on mine.
Oh.
So that's
strange.
So in other words, it says Bill, then it says active speaker, then it says Alex, then it says.
So active speaker is the one that you don't want to use because that's the one that's going to be switched automatically.
Right, exactly. That's the one that's switching automatic, which is okay if just two of us are talking. Then it's okay. I don't care about it then.
This whole interface
it's looking pretty on the web
for me. Instead of the little 4 windows or something like that, I actually now have 3 little circles with people in them, and I'm in a rounded edge rectangle, and Richard is huge.
I am?
Wow.
That's my interface here on this side. That may have nothing to do with what you're seeing.
No, it does
you
not.
can also get all of the circles on the top, and you can drag these.
I love all of us technologists trying to figure out Skype.
Well, you know, all of us, I think, here use this technology a good little bit for communications. And so if they roll out changes, you're kind of like you're trying to wrap your head around what's the new thing so that if it becomes mission critical for something, you're not completely messed up and you at least know how to function with it.
Exactly. And you know what Microsoft does is you use it, you're moving along, you have meetings, and then you schedule a meeting and you turn it on and they've changed the interface
and everything
without
is totally
even
different.
telling you. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's the new ship and iterate versus golden master and ship ideal. You know, and iteration is just something you have to deal with, but you deal with it in real time. And in like this case, you deal with it semi-live.
So Apple do that for Safari. There's a version of Safari that is a kind of pre-release seed that goes out every few days, and it's based on partially on the libraries that they used to underneath Safari that are also used on other browsers. Would anyone like to subscribe to a similar thing for Final Cut, a less reliable version that crashed quite a lot? That was essentially the Premiere version, the Adobe version of Final Cut, which was more like an experimentational version that Apple put out there, but they would say is not supported. And if it crashes all your hard drives or your iCloud, then that was your fault because you weren't careful about running this version of the software. Would anyone be interested in running that or having it on a spare machine?
Is that something
on a spare machine with no projects? Maybe, if it would help somebody else, but not
air gapped to the world, maybe. But you know what's going to happen. You're in that talking to your friends, and the next thing you know, the corporate call comes in, and you're suddenly live with everybody, and nothing's functioning.
I'm only saying that because one of the advantages of Safari doing that is the fact that that contributes to planning for the future of Safari for the people in the industry who need to connect with the way that Safari works. And that might be quite a good idea for Final Cut.
Yeah, I think that this harkens back to the old, do you more want stability or do you more want features? Because the faster they roll out more features, the less stability you tend to have. And these software things that are mature but don't change a lot, or at least don't appear to change a lot, that's more the we've got it right, don't mess with it. And there's constituencies for both sides.
It seems that Premiere, Adobe have really slowed down in adding new features to Premiere and to some extent After Effects as well. They're really dialing that back. So the new features list is 5 things, and 3 of which are slight improvements, and then 2 things that are really cool. So this is this year and last year for both Adobe Premiere and for After Effects, which is really interesting that they seem to have kind of realized that it's just not worth it. And now they're really being hammered on some aspects of it. And you might as well just do 2 or 3 things really well than do 15 things and never go back to them and fix them because they need to add new features. So it seems something seems to be changing there.
Well, if you're trying to attract market share, then new features are always, I think, more buzzworthy than we plumbed in better performance or we have more stability. You can't really, people don't talk about that other than the quiet, wow, this is really working well for me, which is a lovely message to have out there. But it's not like, wow, you got a 72 channel mixer with all sorts of buses and everybody, the audio guys can all go nuts over that.
So we're getting comments. I'm going to post a few. This is one from Jonathan Edwards from Facebook. I would be happy with plugin detection, team, libraries, projects, and better XML support. I think we all would be very happy with any of those things. The things we see that people want, the lists are enormous. Everybody wants lots of different things, and we get them as they can put them in. If they want to put them in.
Yeah, well, there's 3 million or so of us. And so if we all want one thing, that's only 3 million things.
Well,
why is that hard for a team? Why is that hard for a team to put in?
I was expecting perhaps a number update this time, but we didn't hear anything about a number update, from the press room or whatever. They've announced
the world would have
known
if 10.5 had come out, the world would have known about it.
Yes.
A number of sales, I think. So, I suppose that will be. I still think they like to use Final Cut Pro and have it in their back pocket when they're explaining both Mac OS releases and also the new Mac Pro. So that's why Logic gets updated in August for Catalina, even before Catalina comes out, but Final Cut Pro gets updated kind of on the day that Catalina comes out.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's really for journalists to understand what the hell Catalina is in terms of 64-bit and all that kind of stuff. And then when the new Mac Pro comes out, there's a good chance that what's the best demo app for that? Final Cut Pro, because you can show people all the post-production apps you want. But editing software is much easier for straight journalists to kind of understand why the Mac Pro is better and why it needs all that flexibility and expandability. So I think to some extent, as far as we can tell, the timing of Final Cut Pro releases seems to be controlled by other things going on in Apple. As far as we know, there's no way of knowing, and I'm sure even the Apple people that met the people at the summit couldn't talk about what was really going on because there's limits to what they can say even in private.
But it's obvious that go ahead, Sarita.
No, go ahead, because I was going to change the subject.
Well, it's just the whole metal rewrite. I mean, it was pretty clear, I think, from the messaging at WWDC and everything else that the metal rewrite was going to consume a lot of stuff. And it just appears that from what has been publicly discussed, the ability to work in these higher rasters and have more things simultaneous. A lot of that was going to depend on that top to bottom strip and replace of the old frameworks for the metal frameworks. So my hope is that now that plumbing is done and we have Catalina and we have the whole new kind of structure of metal underneath Final Cut, that's going to allow things that it used to seem to me that, I kind of heard vague things, not from Apple necessarily, but from people who are better engineering brains than I am by a factor of 1,000. Those people were saying, yeah, we could have plumbed in this feature maybe, or they could have plumbed in this feature maybe. However, it would have slowed down other performance things. And if you get the bigger engine in the car, then you can have more accessories because the generators are bigger and it's more power and everything else comes easier.
I love the idea of the Final Cut team saying, okay, well, the metal, we're talking about Metal 2. So Metal is quite old, but Metal 2 is... Yeah. The funny thing is, I love the idea of somebody from the Final Cut team getting in touch with the OS team at the beginning of the year saying, and the cool thing is, we're quite far ahead with Metal 2, rewriting everything from OpenGL to Metal 2 for Motion and Final Cut. So we'll be able to release that pretty soon. And then the OS team say, great. Then the OS marketing team say, look, we know that Metal 2 came with High Sierra and will work in High Sierra, but I think it would be really nice if you made it so Final Cut didn't work in High Sierra and move people onto Yosemite. And so we say with Catalina that it's recommended for Catalina, but the minimum is Yosemite, because technically Metal 2 is inside High Sierra. So again, I think it is a good chance that the video applications team or the Pro Apps team have been affected by marketing decisions from the Mac OS team.
Wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I don't know. But yeah, it's a big company and they got a lot of engineers working on a lot of different things. And it is easily conceivable that something one engineering group or team is working on will be a linchpin for things that another engineering team wants to do better.
So we keep getting the comments. I just want to say, Knights of New Jersey asks if we can look getting an overall vibe, happy, neutral, heading for the exits. Well, it's absolutely happy. I mean, this was absolutely a very, very good summit. Each summit is different. Each summit, this is my fourth one at the Juniper. Each one's been different. One of the highlights both last year and this year was a private session. This was made public, of course, on the FCPX Creative Summit website, a private session with the FCPX Pro Apps team at the Juniper, Q&A session. We've had it for 2 years, this year and last year. Those are one of the highlights, and they both times they were fantastic. So, but I think everybody was happy. I mean, just meeting friends. I got to meet Serena and Bill and Felipe and all these people, Brad Olson and of course Chris Fenwick, my friend. It's fantastic meeting people. That's one of the highlights.
Honestly, best summit that I have been so far. Just the sheer amount of
you cut out, Felipe.
That were shared in the site.
Of what?
Of experiences and incredible people that were there, and all of the things that they had been gone through in feature films and all of their projects. Those are things that we should be talking more about. All of those conversations that are happening in the corridors during the session and after the session, those things were amazing. And every time that you're able to talk to someone that you don't know about it and get to know them a little bit more, you're just increasing your network and your reach. And those things, I think, those are the reasons why someone would go to a summit and not just because of having a visit here and there. It's all about the people, I would say. That would be more my 2 cents. And going back and forth between the discussion of like, are we happy? Are we unhappy? Was the food good? Was the food not good? This is pointless. This is pointless.
I haven't heard anybody talk about the food. Yeah. No, I think everyone.
It was pretty good though.
It was excellent. Well, they had one lunch catered and one breakfast catered out in the hall. So that was fantastic. I wasn't expecting that. Last year we went out off the campus, so we had a catered lunch, but that was very good.
I mean, I went to NAB this year for the second time in a long time. And if you actually look at the announcements of the NAB, it wasn't amazing, but it was one of the best trips to the Final Cut world that I've ever been to, because of all the people I met and people I connected with, especially, with Felipe, and seeing your, post lab, and just seeing your relationship with Hedge, and seeing people, watching people really absorb what you're doing in the presentation you gave was so exciting, and being there and witnessing that. So from the outside, of course, if you're not at NAB or you're not at the summit, then it just looks like, oh, okay, because there wasn't a big whiz-bang show that is essentially leading into world news associated with what the future of Apple means it wasn't a good show. That doesn't follow at all. It doesn't follow at all. At the previous Creative Summit, I was there when a new tool was born because somebody, using the Finder as a MAM and became, Final Cut Pro. Or Finder Cat Pro, I should say.
Right.
And but here's the question: how about if the next FCPX Creative Summit was at the same time as NAB? So, because this is to some extent preaching to the converted, right? We quite a lot of the people, if you pay the money to be there, it's not like you need to be sold too much. To what extent are the people who are attending, are they given the resources to go out and share the good news? That's, of course, very important for the summit.
But that's what Faster Together was. Because Faster Together was a huge session at NAB for people that are at NAB, not necessarily just for Final Cut Pro people. And it had so many great speakers, people on the stage that whoever is coming attending, they might not even know that they're coming to see Final Cut. And then suddenly they're like, oh, this is done on Final Cut. And the next one, oh, this is done on Final Cut. And they're like, oh, I'm on a trap.
And especially probably the guy who's been around these shows for the longest, because I'm among the oldest here. The resources necessary to put on something like this are boggling. And so to the Koziks and everybody else involved in FMC, they are doing a huge, huge plus for the community by mounting these. Yes, it's a business, they're in it to make money and all the rest of that, and that's fine. But the fact that it exists at all is a minor miracle. And I say that from somebody who was involved with the Super Meets from the time that we did the first one all the way through when they got to be these big things at NAB. And I watched very carefully as they tried to scale an event at a huge trade show. It's daunting. And because I know the people at LumaForge, I watched that happen, and I was on part of the crew for the last Faster Together thing at NAB. That is daunting. It takes a tremendous amount of energy and a tremendous number of resources on top of all the contacts to be able to just do this at all. So the fact that we have these things to go to are fantastic. The other thing I wanted to comment on was just about the fact that in a lot of cases, people are desperately trying to fix their software so that they can be productive. And one of the things about, no new big announcements or whatever, well, in part, none were really needed. They were wanted. Yes, I might, Sean is still down there in Australia and upset because dupe detection isn't still there. And he has a legion of people who would like dupe detection. But that doesn't stop you from working. And I have just been through an extraordinary quarter with more pressure and more deadlines and more finished pieces. And I just have to thank the team because it didn't fail me for a second. And I was able to get all that work done and out in a very timely fashion. And that's what makes me my living. So as long as that's not broken, I kind of feel like, yeah, we would like improvements. We would like things. But there's not a lot of fundamental stuff that needs to be fixed right now so that the pain goes away. And unless somebody else has a different thing. Is anybody having trouble getting their work done with Final Cut?
Go to Premiere. Go to Premiere and try to see if you're really having problems on Final Cut.
Yeah. Can I ask you guys a question?
Sure. Go ahead, Serena.
We don't have a whole lot of time. And I'm wondering, what the difficulty for me was especially if you're presenting a couple of sessions, you're busy getting that ready. And I wasn't able to see a lot of the sessions. And I know everybody was talking about how great they were. So, for example, Felipe, I really want to see your session, and I wasn't able to be there. And and they always counter program me against against Patrick Southern. But were any of you? Thank God the room was full anyway. I mean, I don't know how that happened, but were any of you guys in the last tip show, the last tips and tricks that they did? Because I had to leave. Was there anything really wonderful about that last presentation, or was there anything special that you learned during the summit that you didn't know? I'm really curious about that. And also, Richard, I was going to ask you, do you know where we go to? I think we have to pay extra to see the recordings. Have they told you anything about that?
I'm sure there's going to be a follow-up email with a link to that. So
okay.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, we get to. They have the recordings. I was surprised, but they made the recordings available to the public for $399 to rent them for 90 days. Now, here's the thing: they're just screen recordings with voiceover. They're not.
It's okay.
Because I kept saying, where are the cameras?
Yeah, you had the same question I did. I kept thinking, why? Is there a little GoPro somewhere in the corner that I can't see?
Because I do AV production like that, and I'm thinking, where are the cameras? And they said, no, it's just screen recordings and then voiceover. Okay. So those are going to be available. I don't know. They should be available on FCPX Creative Summit to the general public at some point. Yeah. And then for us, the attendees, I think it's a nominal charge.
Yeah, that's fine, because as any video maker knows, most of the information is carried on the audio channel anyway. You'll be able to get most of the stuff out of these presentations, even if there isn't a live camera.
So what were some of your favorite presentations, or what was some things that you guys as pros learned? I mean, I loved watching Joshua Myers talking about 200 hours of footage and how he managed, right, Felipe, he gets it. I mean, how he managed to organize all that. And of course, all the shout outs to Philip and Greg throughout the whole summit. I was amazed and very proud of them. Almost every major production somehow used one of either Intelligent Assistant or Lumberjacks. And I'm sorry, I sound like I am promoting us. Anyway, Joshua was amazing. Joshua was amazing. But I'm sorry I missed the tips and tricks. Were any of you guys there, or did you have to leave too?
No, I was there. It's like they normally are. I mean, they're like people come up there and show different tips and tricks. And it's, they did some motion ones, which was.
Can I share a tip?
Pardon?
Yes. Can I share a tip that for me was the best tip of the show, and it has nothing to do with Final Cut. You get notifications on the top right, and every time that you want to go to the inspector, there is a notification that just appears on top of what you need to click, and you're like, oh my God. Yes.
I know, I hate that.
There is that little icon on the top right that is for you to go to the notifications. If you option click that, it's going to turn on Do Not Disturb, and you option click again and turn off Do Not Disturb.
What a great tip.
Thank you. I love that.
Yeah, wow. This one I didn't know, and it's just like, wow, one of the best tips for me.
How does that help me when I'm stuck on my phone here? I can't option click on my phone, I don't think.
Well, I don't know. I think I wish I had been in more of the sessions. There was an awful lot about smartphones too, and collaborating using smartphones and iPads and things like that.
Yeah, there absolutely was. Yeah.
I had a great time at all of them. I have to say that Sam Messman, I thought, really hit it out of the ballpark. He is such a great guy, and his talk surprised me and may have changed a good bit of my thinking about a lot of things.
Yay! I'm so happy.
Yeah, Sam's what he's doing with that We Make Movies crew and the iOS shooting stuff. That's the high level strategic stuff that we get too often separated from, because we're deep in the tactics of editing, and we all are. I do it too, and that's what you drill down on every day. How do I execute my ideas in editing? And that's usually tactical. What are my keyboard shortcuts? And Sam just took us all to a level, a 10,000 foot level, and said, think about what you're doing.
But
think about why you're doing it.
But it's important to remember, if anyone watching this thinks, well, iPhones are just for kids, it's a waste, that shows that it's not professional. You should know that there is the hashtag on Twitter called hashtag Mojo, M-O-J-O, and that is for mobile journalism. And there's so much actual conferences about how to do real broadcast journalism with Android phones and iPhones and iPads. I follow this guy who does training for lots and lots of journalists at the BBC, and he puts out videos all the time about how to do broadcast news using iPhones and pairs of iPhones and getting them to work together in the field, and usually going to Final Cut at the last possible stage, but certainly using LumaTouch as well. It's really out there and it is professional. So if you're thinking snobby and you think, oh, why do they waste the summit presentation with doing that, then you're wrong, because the right camera in the right place is often, an iPhone, and soon it'll be an Apple Watch. You never know. So,
I would add to that, say the right camera in the right place with the right intent. And that is, I think, as much what Sam was talking about as anything else. It's not just having the tools. It's stopping to think, what am I doing with this? And without giving anything away, at the beginning, he contrasted a trailer for an Avengers movie with a locally produced thing that We Make Movies did with community sustainable farming and little gardens in urban areas, and challenged us with the question of which of these two things is more important. And it's not a simple answer, but it does say, if all you're trying to do is the next Avengers movie, and if that's your goal with learning these tools, fine, pursue that, and good luck with it. If you want to make the next movie of the type that you like, fine, pursue that. But he was saying also, remember, there are other types of movies and there's other types of content. And that can sometimes have a more direct impact on the well-being of communities and people than sitting at a movie for an hour and a half and escape from things. And that's not to be dismissed as this moves out and everybody has these phones and everybody has to decide, if I want to make a movie, what kind of movie do I want to make? So just that. Absolutely.
We're bringing the smartphone studio to San Diego on the weekend of January 4th. Yeah, we're coming. We're gonna do a 2-day workshop in San Diego the weekend of the 24th. So that's awesome.
Excellent.
We're looking for tools that don't get in the way of us telling our stories, and we have to work out why we're telling the story. Mm-hmm. I think quite a lot of the time we're telling a story to change the world. Now, sometimes that world is your local school. Sometimes it's the whole planet. But it is still changing a part of the world. So that's why we tell stories. That's what narratives are about. And that's the impulse. Even if it's to entertain, to make the world a little happier. So you tell stories to change your world. And this is what these tools are about. All of them.
So what did you guys
think
about...
I wish... Go ahead.
What did you think about the keynote with the banker, with Samuel Jackson, Stephen Moyer? They shot that on film because they wanted to get more of a certain time period look to it. They shot that in film and they edited it in Final Cut Pro in 2019.
Yes.
That was awesome.
From what I know about it, it reminds me of the workflow that Thomas Grove Carter did when he was in Eastern Europe about 4 years ago, in which he got the video tap footage from the video tap of the film cameras.
Wow.
And then they immediately starting the video tap, and they created compound clips of every single piece of footage, and they edited with the compound clips. And then when the new digitized footage came in 3 days later, they just went into the compound clip and replaced the video tap stuff with the video digitized footage, and it just continued. They didn't have to create a pancake timeline and try and recreate the whole edit. The edit was exactly the same. So
and for those of you who have never worked with a 35 millimeter camera on film with a video tap, believe me, it's an interesting experience. I've done it a couple of times in my career, and what you get is the equivalent of a Buster Keaton silent black and white movie kind of. I mean, literally, unless they've improved, and I'm sure they've improved the video taps from these new cameras or modern cameras substantially, but it's not high res,
when
high
did they
fabulous.
Start doing that?
I got stuff off a video tap probably in 1979 or 1985 from a 35 millimeter shoot back in the days when, you'd shoot a commercial or something on 35 millimeter, and then you'd send the film off to the lab, and it was, as he described in this, it was 4 or 5 days before they could rush that through developing and get it back to you. So you didn't have any footage to work with. So the video tech, when it came to 35 millimeter camera, was a little video camera that saw the gate and took a video signal off of that.
I see.
But it was not high quality.
What are they
wasn't
now?
Stevens' crew pulling stuff off the Atomos Neon?
I don't remember where he said he was getting his.
I think they were. I think they were recording to the Atomos, and then they were pulling it off of that.
No, they had. I thought they had a transfer from film. At some point, they were talking about that. But here's the thing: they said it was very complex. One of the things they were working on that most people were surprised. They had 2 iMac Pros, which they said was overkill for what they were doing. They were working off not direct attached, bus-powered storage, 4 terabyte bus-powered storage for storage. Right. Everybody was kind of surprised, but he said
little plug in your USB.
He said the reason is it's very complex, and it's not a matter of unplugging a bus-powered drive and replacing it with a RAID. It was much more complex than that. We had to go through a lot of layers, budget and everything else, and that's why they did that.
Felipe, I really wanted to see your session on collaborating with anyone, anywhere.
I was there. I filmed a bit of
it. Were you?
I'll send you a clip. Yeah. Once I found out they were not filming the actual sessions, and they were just doing screen grabs, I tried to get into everybody's. I got some of yours, Serena. I got some of Sam's. I got some of Felipe's. I tried to do a little bit of everybody's, just to give people an idea of what it's like being in the room and hearing things. Now, of course, if it was darker, the iPhone didn't do as well. It would sometimes a little grainy. The wide lens, it's just almost useless in the dark, the wide angle. But it's still, if the lights are on, it's a fantastic lens. Outside, it's fantastic.
I can say that for everyone to keep an eye on FCP.co. There will be some interesting things there. So
good. I love what they're doing lately, don't you?
Yeah, I think FCP.co has always been such an important website, such an important resource of information. Not only a place that you get to know about projects that you wouldn't otherwise, the case studies that Ronnie writes, that Sam is writing, and that now Steve Bays is starting to write. All of those things, I think it's important as a very high-level view on this world of post-production and filmmaking and where Final Cut fits in those things. But not only that, even in the forums, it's very frequent that I'm searching for something on Google, and one of the first answers is coming from the FCP.co forum. And now with all of these partnerships and Peter not being just by himself doing that, I think it's going to be super important as a resource for everyone that's starting now, or all of the professionals that want to stay updated on workflows and what other people are doing.
That's awesome. I know. I've been really happy with what's going on.
I'm gonna challenge the FCPX Creative Summit in terms of it was the same week as Adobe Max, the same week, and Adobe Max had huge stage, thousands of people in the room, multiple sessions, all immediately the next day available online from Adobe. And Adobe is not a very big company compared with the companies that we're talking about here. And those streams are available for free. The going to Adobe Max costs more than the Creative Summit. I think the actual retail supposed price is $1,500 or something like that. But usually you can get discounts down to $900, and they get all those 5,000 people to go, and they have lots of different sessions and lots of different people going. So. And I also have worked on events. I actually worked in the conference industry for a while, and I worked on the developer event for Cisco in Europe. So that's 5,000-6,000 people going through 17 or 18 different sessions all at the same time, all over a big venue in Milan or Berlin or wherever. And it reminds me of WWDC. So how about this for a challenge? FCPX Creative Summit at WWDC. So it's there in San Jose. And it's happening at the same time, sometimes with Apple people there, or the Apple people are busy at WWDC. But it's just preaching, it has a slightly different, I don't know. I'm just thinking, how do we get to the stage of Apple Pro Apps Max, the equivalent of Adobe Max? Does that matter?
Do you think we ever will?
Well, and another way of doing it, of course, is to use the FileMaker Developer Conference. I don't know how many people go to that, but there's a big FileMaker Developer Conference that happens every year. I think it's in August, and FileMaker is a subsidiary of Apple. FileMaker has members of FileMaker staff, i.e. Apple staff, giving presentations, talking on forums, talking to everyone, and it's all public. And it's to FileMaker developers, now people who are actually creating custom solutions for databases for people. So imagine that is freelance workflow experts creating solutions for people. They're coming to get me. So I'm just thinking, what do we want? It's nice to have the same. I was at the first Creative Summit in San Jose, and I was at the second one. I wasn't there last year or this year because I had work. They're fantastic. So I think I've been to 3 out of 5.
Okay. So
what next? What next if we really want to push it out there? What next what's the business case study for FMC going to Apple, to the Pro Apps team, or the Pro Apps team's going to FMC and to the wider Apple to say, this is what we want to happen and this is the benefit from it, including preaching, actually not preaching to convert it. So what's the solution? A tour, more people seeing it, a free thing that more video professionals go to of all different levels, a thing associated with Google and YouTube because they like Final Cut and doing training and that all over the world. What next for events like the Creative Summit, if not the Creative Summit?
Well, here's what I see as the problem. Apple, unlike Adobe, does not want to be in the conference business. Adobe, with their subscription model, it makes perfect sense from my point of view to sponsor that kind of promotional gathering because they're constantly promoting because it has a direct impact on their revenue stream. Apple, on the other hand, does not. Not only do they not do conferences generally, we all know that, and part of it's the privacy thing or secrecy thing, and there are other pieces of it, but they also still have the you give us your $299 once and we're cool with it, which is a utterly different revenue model. So there is no financial benefit to the company for trying to do that. It would be pure community building. And how much resources do you devote to that? And I'm trying to think of other software companies, anybody who does that kind of expense for pure community building today. When all the information swirls around the internet for free globally instantly, what other businesses? And I can think of a couple, there's still medical neurosurgeon conferences where they, bring people into Hawaii for a week. And there are other big conferences still around. Companies like Salesforce kind of do it. But I can't think of any other software vendors for the public that do that. But maybe not thinking wide enough.
Felipe?
Yes, I would have a question. What would people rather have? A company that will take 5 to 6 months out to plan to be in a conference and not be working on their features and bugs and stuff? Or would you rather have them be a little bit quieter, not be out so much in public, and be able to concentrate on listening to people
Well, I mean, the answer to that is: should developers be at the Apple developers be at WWDC giving presentations about the future of macOS?
But it's not only about marketing. It's about see it this way: every team in a corporation, no matter which corporation it is, they have a budget assigned per year. You can't just be cashing in out of the bigger corporate side of Apple all the time, or any company. You have a budget per year. That budget gets decided, okay, where the money goes in. If we go to NAB, it's a really big portion of a budget. So if they go to NAB, they end up not doing a lot of things marketing-wise, but that price, that budget that they have might cut into R&D, might cut into engineering hours, might cut into people being hired. So
I just think they look at the model and say, does it make sense? I mean, they have one, WWDC. That's their big conference. And so it is there to support the app ecosystem and developers, because that's what makes that thing work.
Well, in the case
I'm
of
not sure there's the same case for a pro apps, for all the pro apps.
Cool thing. Imagine if Final Cut Pro and the video applications group was actually under Claris, the newly renamed holding subsidiary for FileMaker. Mm-hmm. FileMaker is a professional app. It's cross-platform. It's got a huge ecosystem of 500 or 600 extra databases that individual freelancers and individual companies then make available to other freelancers to actually implement. So their ecosystem is bigger, so they can have an event which includes the ecosystem meeting their audience. In other words, people who develop databases. It's not too far off workflow experts who will need to meet people from the Final Cut Pro ecosystem. So the ecosystem, and a bigger ecosystem than we've got now, it's fantastic having 50 or 60 companies and individuals working in the Final Cut ecosystem, but it isn't 500 or 600. And it isn't lots of people going out there as freelance workflow consultants going around and helping people create up their Final Cut and Pro video workflows in lots of different businesses all over the world. This is how I think it would appeal to Apple, the wider Apple. Say, look, we can actually get maybe 200,000 or 40,000 individual little businesses betting on Apple, and you're changing their world. You're changing their working world. You're actually making it so that they can leave their job they don't like, set up a new business, and then they can make the world around them and their town better using Apple hardware and software. And this is how the video applications team, I imagine, are trying to sell the nature of the new Mac Pro and Final Cut, hopefully to the wider Apple, to actually justify why the old Apple.
Maybe like with FileMaker Pro, though, Alex, it takes a certain level of maturity, because they didn't do this for FileMaker Pro for decades. I mean, I've been using it since, the mid-90s or before. And only this last couple of years has FileMaker Pro been kind of elevated, and I get more messaging and more stuff. Plus, they're in the middle of this migration. It's really moving to being more a cloud-based solution than I think anything else I can see inside Apple. And that maybe this is their test bed for, as we all know, sooner or later, someday, most if not all apps are going to live in the cloud and be thin client-based kinds of processes. Maybe they're doing that with FileMaker Pro first. And maybe as they learn expertise in that, they will push that out to their other software models, including the Pro apps. Just pure speculation again.
Cool. Okay. Well, I'm just putting it out there about what we want from the future of community and events, and obviously this is relevant.
If these thoughts are in our head, where will it go? Where will my software go? And we're all thinking about that. And what are the initial little signposts now that can help us kind of prepare our brains for what it will be like in the future? Because we do have to change. I mean, working on Frame.io, working on these distributed systems is a change. You have to figure out how to manage it and learn it and work with it.
Maybe we should actually allow the audience comments to actually, because we're hogging it horrible.
Normally I read some of the comments, but everybody's talking so much, I'm just putting them up on screen. I mean, dozens and dozens and dozens of comics. If I started reading them all, I'd be interrupting everybody. So.
Oh, good. Because we can't see that, guys. That's why we're not responding to them.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we're not responding to you because we don't know you're saying anything.
If you watch the YouTube stream, you get about a 7-second delay. You can see them.
Is there anything we should answer?
When I was on my regular camera last week, I did that. I watched the comments on my phone, but I'm on my phone today for reasons.
Well, I'll read one. Here's one from Jonathan Edwards. It says, it's very scary for developers to bet on Apple. For example, I just had to strip every plugin out of Final Cut Pro because I had no idea which one was breaking. That's a current comment. So,
okay.
Well, even more so than Final Cut Pro, when it was an update, I got to worry about Logic plugins. I have
as a developer, as a user,
more.
Then you're going to have to weigh the benefit cost thing, right? So you're not doing something because you're worried it's going to break, and that's possible. But also at the same time, you are willfully giving up access to that gigantic, successful, well-functioning ecosystem by not doing that.
Alex, give me a high five if you're not updating till next spring. It's the same with me.
I'm on 10.4.6. I'm sticking even to the older version. I'm happy on High Sierra. It's very nice down here in High Sierra, let alone Mojave. So maybe in January, February, I'll go to Mojave, let alone Catalina.
Well, I went to Mojave, but
Catalina October next year, baby.
Yeah.
I update, but I always keep at least one machine that has the older version on it in case something happens. And the one thing we always need to keep in mind is some of these third-party apps. You can't blame Apple for that either. I mean, they have to keep progressing with their software. And yeah, I know us as developers, we're always going, oh my God, can I keep up? But that's just sort of the progression. I know if I'm in the middle of a huge theatrical documentary, which I'm right now, that one's staying on the old machine. I'm not going to put that one onto Catalina, after years of working on it. But I don't know. I don't want to stay in the way of progress. And yes, anytime a company updates their software, you are going to run risk that something's not going to work. So keep one of your machines with the older version. Go ahead and update for security patches, if nothing else. I mean, the new versions are more secure, which is really important and
critical these days.
Yeah, and I'm just so appreciative. I kind of am the kind of person that doesn't worry so much about what's coming. I try to do the best I can with what I have. And also, before I leave, I really want to shout out to Ben and Liat and Danny and all the people that organized
Future Media Concepts,
the summit.
absolutely.
They were there 24/7. They had a smile on their face. They answered all our crazy questions. It was wonderful. And
the fact that they do the summit. I mean, it's an enormous undertaking. It's dealing with a lot of different people and juggling things. And I would say the worst, and one of the factors is dealing with Apple. That's probably the biggest factor because they schedule around Apple's schedule. They schedule the actual event. So that's the biggest one.
Yeah, when Alex brought up the fact that it was the same weekend as the Adobe thing, we heard Jeff Greenberg say, this is not anything not discussed, but he just had a baby. That's why he couldn't be there this year. He had a brand new child at home, and he mentioned at one point that he'd said, is there any way this can be pushed around a little bit so I can at least stay with my baby a couple of weeks before I have to run off to this? And the answer was basically, nope. This is when we can do it. This is it.
His boss was in charge of that. His wife. She said, "You're not going anywhere. You're helping us stay with this baby for a couple of weeks till he got permission."
I love the little movie he showed Alex. You have to see that little movie. Jeff said hello to all of us, and then he panned over to the new baby. It was so cute.
Maybe he'll make that public for people.
And Chris Fenn did an awesome job. Didn't Chris do an awesome job for having jumped in? And I mean, I thought he really kept everything on schedule.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I saw Chris's opening presentation, which included Jeff's video because Richard put it up on
that's right.
in his stream. Yeah. So I saw that.
Oh, awesome.
Oh, yeah. So you can see it online in the first or second video. Yeah. So check it out on Richard's this YouTube stream that you're on now.
Yeah, exactly. This
Richard, you were everywhere.
Well, this is number 12. I've done over 12 hours of live streaming specifically about the Creative Summit. Now, I started at my house for a couple, showing my mobile setup and stuff. But this is number 12. So I didn't show any of the sessions live. I just showed like some of the keynote, like Alex was talking about, because that's people are not going to see that otherwise, right?
My watch is pinging me with Ian's new app called Roughly. Did you guys hear about this? I have it on my watch, and it said it's about 5 after 8. Anyway, I have a meeting I have to run to. I'm so sorry.
Serena, this is much more important than your meeting. I'm sorry. This is at least it's more entertaining.
You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for including me in this. I'm sorry I have to hop off. Yeah.
It was great seeing you again. Great seeing you again
Bye,
in person.
Guys.
See you later.
Right.
See you soon.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Let me take you off. Oops, there we go.
Yep, there she goes. Now it's updating that. I saw Serena left, but I don't see that's the only notification I've seen so far. So none of the tweets.
I'm just redoing the screen again because every time somebody leaves, everything shifts around. That's one of the problems with putting lower third titles up. I got to change them now, but I got them back up the way they were.
Okay. So
Alex, from the outside, since you were from the outside, how I know people were. How did they feel about the summit in general? Do you think?
I think essentially everyone was just focusing on what they were going to learn, what news would come that weekend. So, when I tweeted out, because as a former visitor to the Creative Summit, I was able to be on the WhatsApp group.
Right.
So the WhatsApp group that people shared didn't have any spoilers, didn't talk about stuff that they couldn't talk about. And also I always reminded people that I was there, and people said that some people who haven't signed the NDA, if there was one, were there. Yeah. So I was on that. And as soon as I got the message that they get back on the buses were coming back from Apple, I just tweeted out, no news for now, nothing's going to be made public for the moment. And I think that tweet was the thing that kind of got people to realize they were still hoping until that tweet. And then even the wider world of Apple, Apple fans and Twitter, they started saying no new Mac Pro launch, everyone was even hoping for the 16-inch MacBook Pro, everything. They wanted everything, just like the 16-inch MacBook Pro cannot win. When it comes out, it will not be the answer to everybody's prayers for the last 3 years. So essentially, things were being loaded onto this event, which were pretty unreasonable, and also nothing to do with the people at the event, including the Final Cut Pro team itself. It's to do with other stuff. Who knows? Maybe the Mac Pro is having production problems. We have no idea, and the people attending have no idea. So there's no point. They're not keeping things secret from you, because it's not even in position of the Final Cut Pro team won't be being told about the Mac Pro. They'll just be given an opaque instruction, maybe saying, don't expect it that week. And that will be it. That's all the people will know.
Right.
But from the outside, you're holding your breath, and then nothing. There wasn't any kind of even anything. There wasn't. I mean, I would advise that maybe not exactly a tidbit, but maybe just something. And that's why I think, Richard, you're right. If they just said, we've got it's a million more people since last time are using Final Cut, just one little piece of information, and then the Final Cut faithful can go out there and go, here's some news. There you go. That's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah. We want to share that now.
No, it's true. It's true.
Just tiny little thing. I think that would have been advisable, because essentially, and then of course we're trying to then look at people's expressions and seeing how happy they are in the pictures, and if they're tweeting anything, anyone who's attending, and we're trying to read the tea leaves, criminology, and we don't get anything. So
right. I when I did my live streams, I tried to give as much information as I could without giving away anything that I wasn't supposed to. But here's two things that I can say: the Mac Pro is coming, and Final Cut Pro 10.5 is coming. Period. Both of those are coming. Yeah. We don't know when, but they're both coming.
And this is the discussion of managing expectations, which is a real thing. It is. It's not trivial at all, but it's also, I think, complex. And, this is all these feelings about this, I think, are utterly fair. Why? Well, because at NAB, once upon a time, they sprung a brand new software program on us and changed our entire worlds. And at a different one of these events, they showed us 10.3, I think it was, and everything kind of shifted. So we can look back and say that there have been at these conferences big shifts that have been important to the community. So the fact that a lot of people were anticipating an equivalent type of big shift, that's just rational. It's okay. But how much time does Apple spend in the professional managing of expectations game is something that it would be interesting to have a beer and chat with everybody watching this over. And what do you think they should do?
Bill,
how much of their resources do they devote to managing expectations versus coding software or
Bill,
doing anything else?
Do you think Apple does a good job of managing expectations?
I don't, but it's not because they don't want to. I believe that deeply inside of myself. There's nobody there saying, well, just don't tell them anything. Maybe at the high level there is a directive saying just, there is. Don't say anything about anything, because we want to keep message discipline. And that has worked in sterling fashion for Apple. I mean, it has saved them hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars, not having to go out in the marketplace like most other companies do and advertise and market every feature change, every iteration. What happens with Apple because of this secrecy? They decide to do a conference, or they decide to do a panel or a keynote from Apple, and all the press in the world rushes there and desperately tries to get a seat so that they can pass along whatever Apple has to say to the world, and the world knows. I mean, that's kind of extraordinarily brilliant manipulation of worldwide global reach of your message. That's extraordinary from a marketing point of view. But that means also that you must maintain the secrecy barrier at all times, so that when you break it, it becomes the difference. Oh, they're telling us something. And so I get both sides of it. I just think the game is going to have to change a little bit, and I think we've seen that, and it's changed slowly. And Apple people will even acknowledge that they're constrained by this. It's not comfortable for them, but it's still the reality that they have to deal with. And they are talking more. We are being able to go to conferences and hear more directly from people. And when you realize that somebody is somebody at Apple who works on this team, they will talk to you quietly, not about NDA stuff, but they will interact with you. They won't ignore you because you're not part of there. And I think they're trying to do a little more of that, and a little more of that, and a little more of that. Well, the disclosure of the new Mac Pro is a good example of that, right? In a different era, they would never have done that, but they realized market forces needed to understand that, yes, they were going to do a new Pro machine.
And they also pre-announced the version of Final Cut Pro back at WWDC. They said there'll be a new version of Final Cut Pro coming out in the fall as well. So it's not unusual for them to pre-announce recently. Some of the times, I mean, they, we don't know about the 16-inch MacBook Pro for a fact, but a lot of people have picked up clues in the OS and all. They've seen icons for it, so that doesn't seem unreasonable. That's coming forth as well.
Some people in the audience will never be satisfied with anything less than the disclosure of the punch list of features they're working on currently, and that's never going to happen.
Felipe, you were saying something.
I think that there is one thing that we as humans we've been doing for a very long time, and I think personally is a little unhealthy, is to create expectations. We think much about the future without needing to worry so much about the present, and we start thinking about too much what if, when if, and we forget to live the present. If we talk about Final Cut Pro 10, we have an application that's pretty stable, that does pretty amazing things. If we try to use another application, very quickly we get reminded of that. But even if we use that analogy of expectations for anything else, let's say you go to the cinema and you have extremely high expectations about the movie can be the best movie ever, but if it doesn't match our unrealistic, crazy imagination, it's gonna feel like it's a bad movie. And I think that's where I try to remind myself all the time, be that when I go to watch a movie or when I go to buy a new hardware, not only Apple, or if I go to buy a land and get a mortgage, is try to not have expectations, because more often than not, you're going to get disappointed. So I try to use my Android side, my robotic side, because I'm not very human, and to not have expectations. But sometimes the human side of me takes over, and I have expectations, and then I'm like, oh my God.
Right.
I don't know. It's just setting expectations, right?
Yes, expectations, but you also have precedent. Okay.
Yeah,
you
but
have precedent. You had the last 3 summits. You had precedent that wasn't followed through on this summit. So,
but just because it has happened in the past doesn't need to have to keep on happening in the future, right? I mean, we used to kill a lot more than we used than we kill nowadays, be that people or animals, and it doesn't mean that we have to keep on doing that. Of course, horrible analogy, but But it's
I
just.
think in this case, given the fact that Apple set the date, Apple effectively set the date.
Yes.
It's not. I mean,
Absolutely.
Adobe have already set the date for next year's Adobe Max, and that's the second week in October. Apple are not going to set that date for a long time if they do the Creative Summit, FCPX Creative Summit next year. Apple chose the date, and I'm sure they had the precedent and they wanted to do the same. But the thing is, the Apple that set the date is not the Apple that actually made the decision about the fact that they weren't able to do what they wanted to do. I think. I have no way of knowing. This is a pure guess, right?
Right.
So in practice, I think they could have managed the FMC, even if they knew what was going to happen. They couldn't. They're risking a ton of money on this. A lot of money, and they need to get the maximum number of people attending as possible. So they have to be able to say it's going to be super secret, it's going to be exclusive, and it's going to be really cool, and you have to be there. And of course, it is really cool, and you do have to be there. But FMC aren't going to be. They've taken a big risk, so they can't be to say, oh, by the way, you're not going to go to the spaceship, and there's not going to be any new information, but please come along the way. It's going to be really good, because that doesn't sell tickets, and they have to be able to sell tickets, otherwise the event's not going to happen. So it's really, really tough in this situation. That's why I think having just a number out there or some kind of, throw us a bone, essentially. They have to, given the fact that Apple are good at supposedly identifying with the user story, identifying with who we are and what we want. And we as users actually have to help them identify with us in the story that we tell about ourselves and what we think of, how we feel about what's going on in the community. Then they have to show their empathy and then work out, they may have known as soon as this had huge OS problems with Catalina in August. They said, oh, okay, this is going to be really buggy. And this means this, and this means that, and this hardware thing. And then they'll say, we wanted to change the date to this other day by a day earlier, maybe. And they chose a slightly different day. And then they knew at a certain point that it wasn't going to follow the previous precedents. And then the smart thing to do is to think, well, what are the tweets of the day going to be like? What are the Facebook posts going to be like? What are the conversations going to be like? Now, it's a tiny bubble of a tiny bubble. We're talking about 500 or 600 people caring about this out of 200 people going to the event. Everybody out there doesn't even know there might have been a new release of Final Cut Pro that day. A few people in the wider Apple world are thinking, there's another thing where people are going to the Apple campus. Maybe they'll have some press there as well, and they'll do a thing with Mac Pro. So I think they could have been just a little bit kind of more empathic with us about
that. They're not accustomed to dealing, and this is a criticism, they're not accustomed to dealing with that strategic level. This is all tactical stuff we're talking about, and yes and no and the rest of that. I do think they risk losing a little of the understanding of how important the strategic messaging can be, because nowadays the information, the data is everywhere and everybody has it. It's in your phone. It arrives in your pocket instantly from everywhere that you care about, because the algorithms know you care about it and it'll feed you the information you want. So the data, the hard knowledge is kind of worthless because it's all there and everybody has it. So all you're left with is the attachment emotionally, and we all know that is a part of what's driving the world now, right? It's driving politics, it's driving anything else, is the feeling like you're part of a community. I think that's ever increasingly important. And by not managing some of that in an effective way, you end up in the situation where, to draw a tortured analogy, VHS wins over Betamax. Even though every engineer said Betamax was superior technically, they didn't understand that there was a little emotional component, whether it was that 2 hours for a full show beat, slightly shorter but more, whether it was some tactical, regardless, they kind of lost the battle because they weren't really tapped into that part of the analysis. And I do worry a little bit that in all this brilliance of the development effort that Apple has put into this program, that there may be a larger emotional battle out there that they're not paying enough attention to, but we'll see as time goes by. Because let's face it, everybody who really did expect, and we're all out there saying this stuff is great, and this product it's fabulous. I mean, this product is outstanding, and so you just want, when you find this product that's outstanding, you really want to be able to go out in your community and say, hey, if you're struggling with that product, look at this one, because it's really outstanding. Yeah, it takes a while to get used to, and you have to learn how to do it, but once you do that, you are going to have outstanding results, and you're going to feel better, and you're going to get more of what you want out of a product in this class than you might otherwise. And yet you go out and everybody's going, yeah, well, I just heard it's a mess. I don't want to try it.
I mean, I think,
you heard it's a mess because of that lack of strategic messaging. I think Apple has the resources to trounce that strategic messaging, but because of a lot of things, and probably mostly the secrecy thing, they choose not to do that.
I think Apple don't act as if they need our help now, and they do need our help, because you can't sell Mac Pros like iPhones. You actually need an ecosystem, and you need people to risk selling Mac Pros. You need to risk people getting all the stock, getting all the expertise, and you need to go to the bank and say, I need $500,000 because I want to bet my business on the new Mac Pro being successful.
Sure.
And how do you do that? You have a whole Final Cut community ready to go out there and help support an ecosystem based on this hardware. The new Mac Pro can be used for lots of things, but if you've got 20,000 people who want to use the Mac Pro to do video editing, that's bigger than the chemical researchers, the DNA people, even the architects out there. Now, of course, then eventually architects and other DNA people, and then they'll actually break into more of the high-end PC world. But the easiest one for them to crack is us. So the video applications team can go to the Mac Pro team and say, look, if you've got a go-to-market strategy, let's share it. So we've got a proper ecosystem. And then the Mac Pro people can say to the Mac OS people, you want to promote Catalina? We've got this fantastic go-to-market strategy.
And this all sounds brilliant from our outsider's point of view, but if there's nothing else, I know from working in corporate video with reasonably big things and having spent a lot of time as a fly on the wall in the executive suites of those, the battles we may think are the important ones to win may or may not be the ones that their management team feels are the important ones to win.
If I'm not mistaken,
they may have something else. Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken, didn't they pre-announce one time about a Final Cut Pro update not coming to manage expectations before NAB or something? Or am I imagining that? Maybe I was dreaming that.
I vaguely remember that, yeah.
Yeah, they did pre-announce that we're not going to do an update forthcoming. So they choose to manage expectations sometimes. Same with the Mac Pro. They've done that with the Mac Pro. They've pre-managed expectations. It's going to be out in the fall. So there's no guessing. From WWDC, it's going to be out in the fall. Well, the fall's until December 20th or 21st this year. So we have then for the Mac Pro.
I just think the main thing that's changed is the communication environment that every company works in now. And they're very effective at a lot of it. And it's not like they're not succeeding, right? So if we believe this, a couple of million plus units, maybe 3 million for who knows, that times a couple of $100 is enough to fund a development team for a long time. And you're right, it's a gnat on the elephant in terms of Apple's overall relevance, their income stream. But it is not it's not dragging the company down to do this.
So there's one comment. There's one comment I want to address. Nick Papadopoulos says a tweet that left the sour taste for me by someone I don't recall at the moment was that last year at the summit, the FCPX team was allegedly joking around with user requests. That's nonsense. That's complete and utter nonsense. They're not making jokes about user requests. Never have.
They sat every time I have talked with somebody that I've later found out is on the team or I knew in the team in a personal or larger thing, I have always seen them utterly engaged and listening. So the idea, if that is a thought, no, that's not my experience with anyone from Apple ever. They are genuinely interested in this customer development team engineer interface and trying to learn from us, to the point where they said over and over again, and I think, gosh, I can't remember all the people, we've had multiple people, I think Phil Hodges does this a lot, talking about when you send in your feedback forms, don't just tell us what you want to do, but tell us what you're trying to accomplish. Yes. They want to look more deeply at the problem and analyze the real problem so they can solve it in a way that's not just, oh, you want me to solve it like that other guy's software program.
And also videos. A video works, they said. A demonstration of things sometimes can help.
Right, yeah. If you're having a problem and you can't get something done, make a little screen capture video and then send it in to us. And they're interested in those kind of things. Yeah, in conversations all the time that, they're interested in people's experience. They can't be interested in 3 million people's experience at the individual level. So, but if you send in something that's weird, I've heard rumors of people getting called back from the engineering team going, hey, this thing was weird. Tell me more about that.
So that's the thing. You've got one person who reviews these things and give them a story to tell the rest of the team. Essentially, they review this all through the week. And then there's a weekly meeting, I imagine. And then the person is going to stand up there. He or she is going to say, and I heard this story and that story. Emotional stories about real people trying to get things done that actually matter. And it's this, we are in the business of telling stories and breaking through to people using emotions and making videos and or even writing scripts that tell stories. So do that instead of saying, it's a bit like saying, I want to find gold. I find gold. You tell the story of a prospector actually in their search for gold. You don't tell them what the result is, because the answer might be they'll be happy without the gold. They'll be happy with something else. So getting the gold may not be right for that prospector. And essentially, scrolling timeline, Richard.
I appreciate it. If you could tell the gold searching story in 2 paragraphs rather than
exactly
600 pages.
But what I'm saying, sadly, that it may be you get what you want and not what you need. Now, the problem is we don't know if Apple really know what we need, and we have to tell them stories to help them understand what we need, even if we don't know what we need. It's a slightly different thing.
Yes.
So instead of saying
that's been their messaging is tell us what you're trying to get accomplished, and we will see if this turns out to be the kind of thing we believe the product should accomplish. Our team, and these are very smart people with a lot of experience, the team will try to figure out whether we can address that in an unusual way. They can address that. I don't even say we. I have nothing to do with them. But anyway, I've heard that. We, from their point of view, their teams.
So from what I've heard, the Trash Can Mac Pro was not a gigantic seller. Do you guys think this Mac Pro is going to sell more than the Trash Can?
I'm sure it will, yeah. I mean, I think actually the 2013 Mac Pro probably actually did sell really well. It's just that we don't know about it. It's a bit like saying when we hear about people saying, no one I know uses Final Cut, it's a bit like saying, no one I know has got a 2013 Mac Pro. And then if you think about it and really see it around, they're everywhere. They probably actually sold a lot of them and they were perfectly profitable. It was more what it did for the relationship with the people who wanted a Mac Pro, which is different. Lots of people actually had other kind of Macs, and then they got a Mac Pro before the iMac Pro comes along. They get the Mac Pro, and they're perfectly okay. They're in their little, I shouldn't say an island, sounds terrible, but they're in their own little space, which is perfectly comfortable, and they're betting their business on it, and it's actually totally fine. But I think it's going to be a lot easier for the wars of high-end computing to get their mind around the new Mac Pro, because it's so configurable, nobody will be able to come up with all the combinations of what you can do with it. And especially when people start bundling their own devices to go in there, and that Apple don't even approve. They'll be able to put in whatever they want and make whatever stuff that they want to go in there, and they're going to even run Windows on it and to have their own drivers, and it'll do amazing stuff. It'll be perfectly high-end. The main problem is there's no go-to-market for it in terms of people trusting that it's going to be successful, who are the old guard. And the old guard are the people who have the ear of the people that we'd like to have influence. I like the idea. The reason why I want Final Cut to succeed is I believe so many people are wasting their time learning stuff they have to unlearn, especially in educational institutions. Eventually they'll come around to it, but it just seems to be a big waste of energy. And I want that waste of energy to stop as soon as possible. That's
so
essentially
when people buy cars, right? Some people buy expensive cars. Some people buy mid-range cars. Some people buy cheap cars. The person that buys the expensive car is getting to the same place as the person that's buying the cheaper car. So they buy it because they want to buy it and they can afford it. There's no reason why they shouldn't buy it just because somebody thinks that they shouldn't buy it because they don't need it, right? Same with the Mac Pro. Somebody wants to buy the Mac Pro, let them buy the Mac Pro. It's none of your concern whether they can afford it or not.
Or they found something about the cheap car that was intolerable. You know, it's fit and finish. And so I live in a cold place and it's snowing and I can never get the heater to bring the car to the right temperature, and because it's a cheap car. And so the next time out, that becomes a priority. And you say, well, I'm going to go for a mid-level car in the hopes that and if you're lucky enough and have the resources, yeah, I'll buy a Mercedes or a Rolls or whatever. And I'll expect that to have a very high level of sealing against inclement weather. And so those are tiers, and you get to fit yourself into the tier that works best for you.
Beginning of next year, there's going to be articles on airline magazines, and execs are going to read them about the incredibly expensive new Mac Pro and the expensive display. And what's going to happen is that people who are being paid $3-5 million a year will go, ooh, that's the Mac edition. It's the equivalent of the Apple Watch edition. Instead of $17,000, they'll go, hey, I'm important enough to have a $60,000 computer, even though all I'm going to do is email on it and use web apps. It'll just be the symbol of that. So IT departments, they'll just go, well, yeah, we have to get ready. We have to buy at least 20 of them because there's 20 idiots in our company who are going to want it. So there's going to be that.
But interesting marketing idea.
Yeah, you know, the Mac
edition.
edition.
More right than wrong about this.
The Mac edition. They're maybe going to have a version that's actually made of diamond. Who knows? It's going to be ridiculous. You know, you'll be able to literally cut your cigar using the actual, the Mac Pro edition. You know, you'll be able to put your cigar into one of the holes, and you'll be able to cut the end off.
Entirely crafted of unobtainium.
Exactly. But I think it's more the $10,000-15,000 market where you really need some people to bet their business on selling and supporting these things. Because I don't know if the support network is out there, because the support network was badly burned by the people waited a long time for between the Tower Mac and the 2013 Mac Pro. They waited years, and people were just really waiting for it so long that when it came out in 2013, they really tried for about 6 months, a year. And then lots of businesses just had to shut up shop and say, look, we're going to now make custom PCs for people using better chips and better GPUs. And all that expertise and all those business relationships that are out there between those people who have got the ear of people who buy custom computers just went out the window because Apple made a mistake, thermal envelope, whatever the reason is. But I don't see a sign that they're doing anything to get those people who got those businesses to trust Apple again. Because they'll, say you're your local store, you've got a few relationships with 200 or 300 businesses in your area, and you build PCs for people. And then Apple say, oh, no, you can't do this. You have to buy it from the Apple store. Oh, we're not going to give you any margin. Tell your clients to go and buy it from us, and then you can be the integrator. And people go, why are we risking our time on this business for the Mac Pro? And that's a real danger. So I think they'll probably sell, 1 million through the Apple store. But I'm interested in the 50 or 60,000 or 200,000 that are actually sold by other people who are going to bet their business on selling them. And that's the thing that Apple have no sign of actually doing anything about.
My story, though, is totally right. I was in the cheese grater world, and I was buying cards, and I was throwing more RAM in them, and I was trying to get performance that way. And it wasn't until 10 came out, and for an arcane reason, I had the wrong GPU in that machine at that time. It wouldn't run Final Cut Pro 10 version 1.0 very well. So I looked over and I saw a laptop sitting there that was, I think, 1.5 years newer. And I looked at the spec sheet and I went, oh, it might run on that. So I remember putting it on there. And sure enough, it would launch and run. And so I started editing more and more just to learn Final Cut Pro 10 on my laptop. And that changed my entire production career. Because as that got stronger and stronger, and as I found out I could edit on my laptop, and I got occasional calls to go out and do work in the field, and I was able to successfully get that done on my laptop, at some point I stopped considering buying desktop machines. And these leaps, particularly in 2015 when I bought the laptop that I'm still on now. I was hoping so much that they would announce something here that I could switch to because I'm ready. But at that point, I was having as fluid an editing experience for HD and even 2 and 4K in proxy workflows on a laptop that there was no compelling reason for me to go back. I'm not in that edge case where I'm doing 4K or 8K constantly. And this works beautifully, even when I have, 3 clients sitting behind me and I have to be a productive editor.
Now, Bill, when you started that, your last segment there, you said, I was in a cheese grater world. You look like you're inside of a cheese grater.
I do, isn't this?
It does. I looked away for a second and I said, is Bill actually inside of a cheese grater? He looks like he is.
I'm in a giant cheese grater. That's where I am. For those who don't know, I do voice work on occasion. This is my voice booth. So we're in the voice booth.
There you go.
Because it was raining, I thought we might get a storm here in San Diego. They blew in off the coast. And this is just a nice place to talk to you guys.
No, it is. Absolutely is.
But you're actually... Oh, go ahead. Your microphone is... Bill?
In here, it's a Neumann TLM 103, but I'm not using it right now. I am using a new, direct back from Cupertino, AirPod.
You are?
AirPod Pro.
Sounds good.
I know. I'm surprised. And I will say this. I'm not trying to pitch AirPods to anybody, but this has been, even in the 1.5 days I've owned it, the automation that they built in about once you do the incredibly simple first pairing, you put it in your ear and suddenly it just pops on and it's ready to go. And when I did this with Skype with Richard, I configured nothing. I just literally turned on my phone, turned this on Skype, and it auto-configured the entire chain for me so that I don't even have my Neumann plugged in right now.
So it's interesting. All I've heard about the new AirPods Pro is the isolation. I didn't know anything about the improvement of the microphone because it sounds good.
Well, I'm only wearing one of them. I've got my other iPod Pro in its case. So all I did literally was open the case, stick this in, launch Skype, and somehow everything in my phone, and this is an iPhone 10, so it's not the latest and greatest, everything just functioned really well. It's very Apple-ish that way. So great job, iOS engineers and AirPod 2 engineers, for getting the teams together and making it just work. That's been my experience in the day and a half. And they do sound really good too. I was watching. When I came back tired from traveling, I just hung out a little bit, taking a nap, and then I woke up and I just started watching Chris Thiele's music show. It's what Prairie Home Companion used to be, Garrison Keillor's show. It's the new version, and This Is Home or something like that. And all these music performances sounded fabulous, just fabulous.
So Apple announced at one point they had 600 people working on the iPhone camera in software. Remember that a few years ago?
Yeah. I remember hearing that.
Do you think we have 10% of that working on the Mac Pro? 60?
Well, I think it's quite likely that the video applications team were counted in that, because the video applications team probably did the new video editing features that are built in iPhone, where it's the rotation and scaling and cropping and all that kind of stuff, and the real time. It's quite. Why aren't you going to use the people who make iMovie work on the on your phone anyway to do that? It's going to be the same. So that number, it includes all the various teams involved in creating little bits of software for that camera, and it probably means the video applications team. So it includes our friends too.
That'd be interesting to. Not that we'll ever find out, but I remember that I was shocked at that number. Well, they announced they're making it
in Austin. I thought, man, there must have been a whole bunch of process and manufacturing engineers went in and said, okay, we're making these circular Mac Pros now. We have to do the analysis of what do we have to strip out, what have to change. Do we do a new factory? Do we convert the existing factory? What's the delta of doing one versus the other? There must have been a whole lot of fast decisions to be made before Tim Cook did the announcement that yes, it's going to be made in Austin. Again, I don't know if same factory or different
assembled,
factory.
at least assembled, and it's I think 12 of the parts are made in America. He said.
Yeah, and that is modern, global, just-in-time manufacturing. I mean, at some point, it's just a matter of putting components together, and I'm sure they want to automate as much of this as possible, not to throw people out of work, but just because, as we all know, those really high-end robots and CNC machines or whatever it is, their precision tolerances can be a lot more acute than a person sticking a thing on another thing.
But at least in the case of the Mac Pro, it is actually designed for people to take apart and put back together again, to have access to the logic board from both sides, to completely take that cage off. So I think that allows for a much more human putting it together, because a human's going to have to take the thing apart and get it slightly wrong, and get it a millimeter off here, a quarter, 32nd of an inch there. So I think of all the Macs, this is the one that will be designed for humans to put together, because another human who's not even a professional who does it all the time is going to have to take it apart, put it back together all the time.
One of the things about the Mac Pro is you just twist the handle on top and pull the enclosure off, the outside enclosure off, but you got to unplug all your cables first. There's a bar across the bottom of that cage, so that's going to take care of hitting all the cables on the way up if you don't do that.
On the other hand, I don't think anyone would be wanting to deal with a computer that is still on while messing with the guts of it.
No, I mean, that's how I heat my studio. I heat my studio with my Mac Pros. I just make sure the warm air blows out towards me.
I'm sure in the case...
And those new Mac Pros have huge fans. I mean, you can have like a nice turbine there warming up everything.
Exactly.
I think the fans are big and slow, but I actually remember on the blue and white G3, sometimes I would open it while it was still running. I have no idea why, and it was actually you could lean the whole thing out like that while it was still going, and the design allowed for it.
With cheese graters, you could open that big side door and flop it down, and the thing could still be rolling.
I didn't mean while it was still running. I'm just talking about all the cables plugged in the back, have to go through and unplug them all. And that's what I meant. Yeah. Because I have them all labeled, typically color coded and a name as well, so I could unplug them. So.
Well, I wonder if it's so modular. Will people produce alternate cases for it? Alternate enclosures? Will Apple make it so it won't run unless there are enclosures on it? Who knows? Maybe people...
There's going to be third-party wheels for that, and there's going to be third-party stand for the Pro Display, I'm sure.
So maybe a third-party enclosures. Like, I think I'm going to have mine in diamond.
As a parent of a not that many years ago teenager, I like the fact that the design makes it a little hard to put stickers on everything. Mike went through an era when him and all of his friends would literally put stickers, and they were I think coming into their branding age, and everybody was pushing skateboarder stickers and everything. I handed him down one of my old Macs, and I looked at it about 3 days later, and I couldn't even see any aluminum on it. It was like full of.
So maybe he might want to throw up a few tags on there now. Put a bit of spray paint on, so you can see if you can fill some of those holes with spray paint. Yeah.
You're right. You can take the whole lattice off, so that means you can take it in the backyard and get some Krylon and go to work.
Or maybe we'll actually have the kind of have a low rider Mac Pro.
The Finnish engineers who put their heart and soul into that brushed aluminum exterior just cringed that I said that.
No. I want to make it so when I press a button, it'll make the ass drop if you actually refer as it goes down the road, and have some sparks appear out the back of that Mac Pro while I'm doing some rendering.
It's interesting.
So we had fun at the Creative Summit this year, right, Felipe, Bill?
It was.
I thought it was great. I had it. I mean, just meeting people, going to dinners and stuff, and of course in the hallways, in the lobby. And then
you just walk out to go to lunch, and you're looking for a place to sit down, and somebody waves you over, and you're not sure you know who they are, and it turns out to be the software development team from somewhere, and you can sit and talk with them for 15 minutes, and they're not even they're from somewhere else in the world, and it's just that kind of stuff you don't get to do all the time. I mean, I came away with new friends from I spent more time with Robin from the Philippines, and that was just wonderful to just sit and talk to him about what's your cultural experience. What's happening in the Philippines right now? And then a little later, one of the guys was an educator from Alaska who lives on Kodiak Island and makes videos out there. And I'm going, this is awesome. Now I know a guy at the top of the world in Alaska. And
then you've also got developers like,
and when somebody says, the glaciers are melting, I got one more person to call and say, look out your window and tell me, is this true? Is it really that bad? Or is it okay? And he's going to tell me something that the news people won't. That's the magic of this, is the friends in every corner of the world.
Then you've actually got developers like, is it Jasper Segers? Felipe? And being a developer, obviously, he came from a TV studio, and he's met real editors who actually were making real TV shows using a tool. But the idea of meeting real people with different stories from different parts of the world, it must be great for the developers to meet real people.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But anyway, the Final Cut Pro team, the people that are hanging at the summit, they're all great. Every one of them is just fantastic. And it's not a singular team we meet. We meet a different team from the Pro Apps team, from the hardware team, from the whatever the different teams are. So it's an amalgam of different people that we always call the Pro Apps team or the Final Cut Pro team, but it's not one singular team. So,
it might not be anybody from the team that changes your life. It might be just another user who's either in an aligned or hopefully completely not aligned discipline of work from you that you can find a little bond with, and maybe it expands your thinking about what they do so that it pulls your career in that direction. Or maybe you expand their thinking about what you do and it pulls their career in your direction. Those are the magic moments at a conference like this. It's that connection.
I think it'd be a really good way if there was a way of sharing that with people outside, kind of almost while it's happening, in like a pair of tweets or a pair of Facebook posts, or one photo plus two pictures.
Originally, social media was supposed to do that, and we all hung to see how well that's worked.
Well, the internet in general, not only social media.
It does some of that. Yeah, it does some of that, but it also has this odd undercurrent where it can be manipulative and too commercial and everything else. But somewhere in this mix of stuff happening, that nugget, that core is still there, which is you meet other people and you share with them.
So one of the people that I interviewed at the exhibitors night was Blackmagic Design. Now, I was curious, why was Blackmagic Design at a Final Cut Pro Creative Summit? But the question I asked, it was a lady, I asked her, I said, the biggest question people have from Final Cut Pro world and Blackmagic is there going to be B-RAW support in Final Cut Pro, and is Blackmagic going to support ProRes RAW, which she said, I just don't have the answer for that. She didn't say, I can't tell you. She said, I don't have the answer. I wish I did. Mm-hmm. But I was curious, why do you think Blackmagic was at a Final Cut Pro Creative Summit? Well, I mean, they had a whole suite there. Color correction.
They make money from hardware. They don't make money from Resolve. They make money from the hardware because they custom make each of their hardware, and it costs them, $40 to make a $700 thing.
Okay.
Maybe $100 to make a $600 thing, depending what it is. And that's how they make their money. All the other operations that they do are about feeding that hardware sale. So there's lots of hardware that's useful from Blackmagic for Final Cut people.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that everything else is the agreements and the IP and the, and they are competitors at the same time. This is kind of a frenemies thing, I think. Any sales team is judged in part by the metrics of market share that you accumulate. That's fundamental.
But so yeah, we had Avid and Apple cooperating, working together. Mm-hmm. So Blackmagic has already worked with Apple on the eGPU and other things. So I don't think they're frenemies. I think they're competitors, perhaps. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's not the best word for it. I don't know if we need to be in another language where there's this word. They have more words for relationships between people, because I don't think there's a good one for this. They are non-hostile competitors, and I'm sure a little hostility raises or lowers, as we can see that lawsuits come by between these big things, and you get these kerfuffles like Qualcomm and Apple going at it head to head over 5G patents and stuff, and then that tension releases, and eventually everybody has to get back to business, and everybody wants to keep selling more stuff, and not develop something that doesn't work with anything else for anybody else, because that serves no one.
Do you think we're going to see the BRAW support in Final Cut Pro 10? Alex,
please, Lord.
Felipe, do you think?
Sorry, I was muted. If I think about what about Final Cut Pro 10?
Do you think we're going to see BRAW support in Final Cut Pro 10?
I think that Blackmagic, who made the encoders, should work on decoders. So,
do you think we'll see it?
I guess there is some more. I think so. There is no reason why not.
Right, I agree.
There's a point in which they want to sell their cameras, and they want to sell their ecosystem, and why not? You know, there's lots of people out there who want to use Final Cut Pro, and they want to use their hardware, and they're a hardware company, much more.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point, because there's a lot of Blackmagic cameras out there, and a lot of people like. That would be a reason why I wouldn't buy one right now, because I can't edit in Final Cut Pro natively, and I don't want to convert it. If I bought a Blackmagic camera, I would use BRAW, or if ProRes RAW is available, use that. Because, I mean, ProRes is already available on those cameras. Just add to the license ProRes RAW. I mean, I'm sure it's not that simple, but it's just, since it already exists, it's not that far of a stretch.
Apple has lost the lawsuit against Red, and now they are working together. I think we can expect things to start moving along, I guess, in terms of
ProRes. There's your frenemies thing right there.
I think this is Red trying to be nice. I don't think they're only working together from a kind of PR perspective, and this is how Red are trying to be kind and spinning the story. And what Apple did was that they applied to the US Patent Office to have a review of the patent. Sorry, the Patent Office, I should say. And they applied to review the patent. And then the judges said, you can't review it yet because you're unlikely to succeed with this application to review it. They didn't say what you've got to say about the patent is wrong. They're saying you're just not writing the application correctly. For example, one aspect of it was you're not saying how we should compare the two kinds of visually lossless compression. You're not stating it in your application to review the patent. And you're not saying how the previous two patents that you're saying actually have all the content. That the Red application is essentially just combining two other patents. That means it's not adding anything else. That means it's not patentable, but you're not saying how they're combined. So if you actually read the rejection by the judges of their application to review it, it is much more that this is bad lawyering. The lawyers didn't get the information right, and they didn't put it together right, so they are unlikely to succeed because they didn't actually ask the question properly. So I think Red know this. And the actual judges are saying this is how you fix your application to get it right, so you can apply again to review this patent. So that's why I think Red are being so nice about it. So it's up to Apple to work out. So that's my interpretation of reading the actual rejection by the judges of the inter alia review of the patent by Red.com.
That's a very nice overview, actually. To know about that. I didn't know that many details. But the other thing that's nice to remember is that the CEO of Red promised a Red RAW decoder that is metal-based for September. And we're still waiting for that.
Is that from Jannard? Because he just retired. So that's going to be interesting to see. Jared Lamb? Yeah. So Jared said that?
It was a statement from Jared Land back at WWDC. And the thing is, at the moment, Red RAW only does decoding on either CPU or on NVIDIA GPUs. So they like cross-platform, and Metal would bring a lot of performance in decoding for a lot of Macs. It would improve quite a bit.
At WWDC, when they were talking about the Afterburner card in the new Mac Pro, they got lots of quotes and also about the new Mac Pro. They got lots of quotes from people at the high end of 3D software and rendering and all that kind of stuff, from people who do renderers that are available on the PC, only on Linux and stuff like that. And they had people from Unreal all saying how fantastic this new hardware is, including, and this is I think where the quote comes from Red, saying we're going to get red decoding coming in the new Mac Pro, maybe in the Afterburner card. So this is, maybe they thought it was coming out in September because Apple thought the actual Afterburner card was coming out in September, because the Apple website actually said it was coming out in September. So this may not even be red. This actually may be.
It's literally red. Jared Land from Apple, and the two keywords that he says is Metal, not Afterburner. And because what Metal 2 right now is doing is managing the processes in parallel between CPUs and GPUs. So when you're doing a decode or anything that's using Metal, it's actually throwing that to CPU and GPU. If you try to just do a decode of R3D right now, it's only going to the CPU. So if you get something that's going to be actually using your GPU to do the decode, and that before ever getting to the Afterburner, that's going to already bring so much more power to the computers that we have. Let's say an iMac Pro can do 1 or 2 streams of Red Raw. They could be doing probably 3, 4, 5.
I mean, the new Mac Pro has actually got the connection between the two GPUs. That's the InfiniBand connector, whatever it's called, and that's based on Metal 2 scheduling with those between those two GPUs. Infinity Fabric, and that's kind of the Apple specific version of Infinity Band, I suppose. So Infinity Fabric, and that's about Metal 2 scheduling between multiple GPUs, multiple CPUs, and not even being limited by PCI Express, and actually using that band thing to actually make it so that the CPUs aren't waiting around, the GPUs aren't being waiting around, and they're all being filled with stuff to do all the time. So
it's also worth noting that the Afterburner is programmable. So it's right now a ProRes RAW decoder or a ProRes decoder with huge performance for that. But eventually, one would imagine you'll be able to program it for a lot of different kinds of performance boosts. Now, it's going to take a while for the specs of it to get out there for that to happen. But that's another part of this. This Mac is designed to upgrade and replace easily as technology changes. And now, so for people who want to chase that.
Am I mistaken, or is B-RAW not covered by the Red patent?
No, because the way they do a partial debayer in the camera, so it's actually not as, it's even more compressed and compromised in the camera before it even gets out and to resolve software. So it's essentially burning in some decisions that aren't burnt in the case of Red RAW. So Red RAW, they say, okay, let's not burn any decisions in because we want to make the post-production as flexible as possible.
Right.
Blackmagic RAW goes in one direction to burn in more decisions earlier on in terms of its partial debayer. ProRes RAW is even better than Red RAW in that respect because they don't burn in any decisions about it. They just give you the sensor data. So those are two different directions from kind of Red RAW being in the middle in terms of compromise.
Okay. And who doesn't think that ProRes RAW is going to get more metadata controls in the inspector coming forward?
I'm sure it will.
The data is there. It's just about exposing it. So.
Right, exactly. That's one of the things people say that they don't like is they don't have as much control. But I'm sure that's forthcoming.
I do hope they open up and they get with more camera manufacturers, because right now that everybody has to acquire, and obviously the R&D that's going into these new cameras continues to get better and better and better. And having just shot with a Blackmagic Pocket Camera 6K, it was an outstanding experience. And for $2,500, particularly incredible. If you own a bunch of
lenses,
good glass,
right?
It's astonishing what you can get out of that system. So any technological proprietary barriers that keep that from going out are a sad thing for the industry. But it is what it is.
Yep.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt, but I have to go now because it's been a couple of hours and there's something I need to do, and I have to have another conversation with other folks. So great to see you guys. And
absolutely. Thanks for joining in, Alex, Felipe.
Peace out. And I'm looking forward to my Mac Pro Lowrider with sparks coming out the back.
With Afterburner.
Cheers. Yeah, exactly. That's what afterburner means. Bye.
See everybody. Thanks a lot for coming in, joining us.
Oh, Philippe left an Apple. Okay,
yeah,
so
we're
it's
good. We're here by ourselves right now, so that's fine.
Okay. Have you stopped the show, or are we still on?
No, you.
Yeah, we're still on. Okay.
Unless you're going to tell me a secret or two.
No, I'm not going to tell. Well, we were both in the same place at the same time, so any secrets one of us knows, the other one probably knows too.
Exactly.
Unless we snuck off to talk with somebody.
I get a kick out of people who think they know what went on at the Creative Summit, but they don't. They say
every
they do.
year, that's been a tension every year, that there's been anything talked about in confidence. And it's not as easy. It's not easy for us either, the people who were in the room. It wasn't easy that first year when Apple passed out NDAs for whoever came to NAB and just signed up for the session.
Right.
And so this is hard for non-pros in the industry. And a lot of us have worked in the industry and been under NDAs before, and we know it. But even the people who don't understand that. And plus, Apple's a little bit of a special case.
And once 10.5 comes out and the Mac Pro's out and the 16-inch MacBook Pro comes out, everybody will forget all this. At least a lot of us will, because it'll be behind us at that point.
Yeah.
Right,
where would this? We wouldn't have any fun if we didn't have stuff to speculate about and imagine.
Exactly. Part of speculation. Exactly right. All right, Bill. I'm going to head out of here. It's been 2 hours. That's long enough, I think.
Absolutely.
I'll see if I can come back later this week with if anything new breaks.
Okay. Take care. Bye,
All right, Bill. Thanks a lot.
Mm-hmm.